Hello and welcome. You're watching News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. On the show, we are going to focus on the rather complex India-China relationship. India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh is currently holding talks with his Chinese counterpart, General Li Shangfu, who is on a two-day visit to New Delhi. This is the first time the Chinese Defence Minister is visiting India since troops of India and China engaged in violent clashes in eastern Ladakh's Galwan Valley in May 2020. Those skirmishes, started by the Chinese, had left 20 Indian soldiers dead. According to India, scores of Chinese soldiers were also killed in retaliatory action by Indian troops. That episode marked a new low in the already fraught India-China relations. Now, this meeting of the two defence ministers comes after at least 19 rounds of talks between the military commanders of India and China amid the standoff in the eastern Ladakh region. General Li's visit is part of a meeting of defence ministers of SCO countries. India is the SCO chair this year. Considered close to Chinese President Xi Jinping, General Li's India visit is being seen as a significant one amid the standoff along the line of actual control. The two ministers are expected to discuss the progress of the military and diplomatic talks to resolve the standoff. Ahead of General Li's visit, the Chinese Defence Ministry, on the 18th round of Corps Commander level meeting held earlier, had said both sides had agreed to speed up settlement of relevant issues linked to the standoff in eastern Ladakh, in addition to safeguarding peace in border areas. The two ministers are also expected to discuss the border issues, including de-escalation in eastern Ladakh and violations in Arunachal Pradesh. The two countries have deployed additional troops in the forward areas, and the issue of a buffer zone strategy that both sides have agreed on is likely to come up in these talks. The two sides are also likely to discuss the ongoing disputes in Depsang and Demchok. Now, this isn't the first political engagement between India and China since Galwan. In March this year, India's Foreign Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar had met his Chinese counterpart Shin Gang on the sidelines of a G20 meeting in Delhi, where Jaishankar told Shin the state of India-China relations was abnormal. The Chinese Foreign Minister is also expected to be in India for the SCO Foreign Ministers meeting in Goa next month. Even though bilateral ties have been quite tense over the last 3 years, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping publicly exchanged greetings on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Bali in November last year. This was their first meeting since Galwan in 2020. Also in September last year, Prime Minister Modi and President Xi had come face-to-face at the annual SCO summit in Samarkand in Uzbekistan, but there was no handshake or exchange of pleasantries at the time. Now, there are multiple thorny issues that have bedeviled the India-China relationship in recent times. Since the Galwan incident, ties between the two countries have seen a steep fall thanks to continued Chinese provocations on multiple fronts. There were clashes between the troops of the two countries in Tawang along the line of actual control in December last year, resulting in injuries. Earlier this month, for the third time in 6 years, China announced Chinese names for 11 places in Arunachal Pradesh, reiterating its claim to the entire Indian state. Now, if Xi Jinping is to visit India for the SCO Leaders Summit later this year, Beijing needs to prepare the ground for his meeting with Prime Minister Modi and ensure that there are no surprises or awkward moments. Remember, in September, India will also host the G20 summit. So what can we expect from today's meeting? Let's throw this open to our guests. Joining me on the show is Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, former diplomat, Dr. Shrikant Kondapalli, Dean of the School of International Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, is also with us. And in a moment, we are hoping to be joined by I believe we already have with us Colonel Shivdan Singh, a defence expert. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. All right, Colonel Shivdan Singh, if I could start with you. These talks between Rajnath Singh, India's Defence Minister, and his Chinese counterpart began here in the national capital, we are told, about half an hour ago. Now, many expect that the two sides are going to discuss de-escalation in eastern Ladakh and violations in Arunachal Pradesh, deployment of additional troops by the two sides in the forward areas, and the issue of a buffer zone strategy that the two sides have already agreed on, in addition to the ongoing disputes in Depsang and Demchok. Is that something you agree with, sir? Do you believe that the talks between the two ministers are likely to cover this entire spectrum of issues between the two sides?
I would like to tell everybody that after 86, when Samdrangchu helipad incident took place, After that, there have been multiple talks between India and China. And the aim of these talks were de-escalation of tension on border areas. And in 1996, our Prime Minister Narasimha Rao and Chinese Prime Minister signed an agreement that confidence building measures will be there, in that the troops will patrol the border areas without weapons. But still, Chinese have violated these all confidence building measures, because of which Galwan took place and because of which Tamang sort of a mudbed took place. So I don't expect from the talks of Sri Rajnath Singh and Chinese Foreign Minister any fruitful outcome, because China is in a habit of deceiving India, which he has been doing right from 55 onwards till today. Now, foremost and most important question is, when will the boundary between Chinese occupied Tibet and India will be finalized? Till such time boundary is not finalized, McMahon line is not accepted by China, this tension de-escalation will not take place. China will always claim the Indian territories, especially Arunachal Pradesh and other disputed area in Ladakh and northeastern sector, because he is not acknowledging McMahon line or any boundary line between India and China. So first and foremost, the long, effective, peaceful measure will be that between two countries, the boundary dispute should be settled and boundary should be identified, which is the actual boundary between the two countries. So
Right.
the talks will be there. They will talk confidence building measures, but Chinese will not adhere to these confidence building measures for long.
All right, point taken, sir. You believe that given China's track record of deception, betrayal, and backstabbing, it is hard to trust that country, and you do not have high expectations from this meeting. Let me go across to Ambassador Anil Trigunyat at this point. Sir, do you share Colonel Shivdan Singh's assessment that, you know, the two ministers may be meeting here in the national capital today? This may be the Chinese defense minister's first visit to India since Galwan, but let's keep our expectations low. Of course, he says that the boundary dispute should be resolved. Now, that is something that has bedeviled ties between the two countries for decades now. That's not going to be resolved overnight. But given some of the recent thorny issues that we've seen, especially since Galwan, what are your expectations from today's meeting? Do you see anything changing? Just for the benefit of our viewers, I want to quickly recall what India's Foreign Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, said when he met his Chinese counterpart, Chin Gang, on the sidelines of a G20 meeting in Delhi in the month of March this year. Jaishankar told Chin the state of India-China relations was abnormal. The question really is, sir, is it going to assume any kind of normalcy anytime in the foreseeable future?
Well, Neha, I broadly believe in and endorse what Colonel Singh said now. You know, our relationship with China has been with mostly the last 50, 45 years has been that of competition with cooperation. And the conflict really was missing from there, but now the third C has been added to it. And we have seen that despite the 18, 19 meetings that have happened, everything is yet to be resolved. And of course, the biggest problem is the demarcation of the borders and the acceptance of the line. But lines of actual control was agreed to under various agreements that have been signed. The problem is that China refuses to respect those agreements. And this is what also the Foreign Minister of India, Dr. Jaishankar, has several times told. That is why the relationship is abnormal. And personally, I feel that China is your biggest neighbor. It is not going anywhere. It is 5-6 times your economy. You don't want a war with them. They don't want a war with us, because that will take both the countries behind. But till the confidence building measures between the two countries are reintroduced, and practical measures are taken on both sides to de-escalate it, I don't see that there is going to be any major change. This visit is taking place in the context of SCO summit, where all the defense ministers are meeting and where China has tremendous stakes, especially as the global world order is changing very fast. But we have Mr. Rajnath Singh has had meetings in Moscow with his defense counterpart. At the same time, when we had the external affairs ministers also went there to meet his counterpart. So the meetings keep on happening. There are assurances that are given. The reiteration that the status quo before the Galwan must be achieved. The military generals, both sides are talking to each other. And we have different mechanisms to de-escalate the tension. But it looks to me that at the moment, nobody wants an escalation. So the effort is through diplomacy to de-escalate the situation to the extent possible. But given the Chinese ilk, I don't see any great change happening.
You know, it is understandable. Everyone is so skeptical about the Chinese because their track record vis-a-vis India in particular does not inspire any confidence. It is marked by betrayals, deception and treachery all the way. Dr. Kondapalli, let me come to you now. You know, even though there have been repeated provocations by China, there have also been some mixed signals. For example, in March this year, China's charge d'affaires, Ma Jia, had told some members of the media, and I'm quoting her, China and India are not threats to each other, but an opportunity for each other's development. They should be cooperation partners to each other instead of being competitive rivals. Some saw that as a bit of a conciliatory gesture. And then in the month of April, you have China making yet another provocation by seeking to give Chinese names to 11 places in Arunachal Pradesh, an Indian state that China lays claim to. So there is no end to the provocations. If anything, there have been mixed signals emanating from Beijing. So the question really is, can we expect anything from these meetings that are taking place, whether between Dr. Jaishankar and his Chinese counterpart, or today between Rajnath Singh and his Chinese counterpart?
Two, three things here. One is the visit by the Chinese defense minister. This is part of the SCO defense ministerial meeting. It is not a bilateral meeting. It is a multilateral meeting. Of course, they were utilizing the visit for also raising the bilateral issues. That happens in any.
So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but correct me if I'm wrong. You're absolutely right. The Chinese defense minister is here to attend a multilateral event. But as far as I know, these talks that are currently taking place as we speak are of a bilateral nature between Rajnath Singh and the Chinese defense minister.
That's right. But the focus is on the multilateral, not on the bilateral. So this will not result in a joint statement, which is kind of binding on each side. So this is not a bilateral. The priority for this visit is not bilateral. I just want to clarify, this is a multilateral meeting in which bilateral issues are not discussed in the multilateral forum. But today it is bilateral meeting. And so they will have some discussions, but the discussions will not become a concrete progress for the future India-China related matters on border issues or other defense related issues. I think that clarification is necessary, number one. Number two is, as part of the multilateral, we were discussing counter-terrorism, we are discussing issues related to regional security and energy security and so on and so forth. So that is part of the multilateral from tomorrow onwards. So this clarification is necessary because it would be not wise to expect some kind of a breakthrough in the today's bilateral meeting because that is marginal. The focus is on the multilateral. So let me reiterate that position once again, number one. Number two, you mentioned about whether the Chinese would abide by the discussions and the agreements, etc. In February 2021, the two defense ministerial officials came to an understanding on disengagement, de-escalation in all friction points. The friction points are between petrol point 10 to petrol point 17 in the eastern Ladakh Aksai Chin region. And so this has to be de-escalated, disengaged. We have had the 18th round of discussions a day before, and no progress was made because there was no joint statement. There is no follow-up that has been announced on the results of this 18th Corps Commander level meeting. So the concern is what Dr. Jaishankar mentioned on June 17, 2020, where he said, unless until peace and tranquility prevails on the border, we will not have bilateral relations improvement. So today's meeting is bilateral. Don't expect any improvement because the line we follow is unless until peace and tranquility prevails on the border, there won't be any bilateral relations improvement. That is what we have been following from June 17, 2020. I want to also clarify this, that we have not had peace and tranquility. Let me rattle a few figures here. China had mobilized 70,000 troops in opposite to Ladakh. We, of course, mobilized 120,000 troops. We also mobilized 11 divisions. That's about roughly about 120,000 troops across the other sectors of the line of actual control. So basically we mobilized, we are now almost eyeball to eyeball, which means that there is no peace and tranquility on the border. You mentioned about the Tawang incident in December. That is also indicator that there is no peace and tranquility. So essentially what we are discussing is to douse these local level frictions, and that project has not yet been completed. So forget about other bilateral relations today or in future, because we have had, as you mentioned, the visit by the Foreign Minister Chin Kang for the G20 meeting. And there was a half an hour or so discussion between the two foreign ministers. That again is not a bilateral meeting with consequence. It is also about the multilateral G20 meeting. So let me just summarize this by saying that we have no bilateral relations since the Galwan incident. And the government of India line is, unless until peace and tranquility prevails, we will not have any improvement in bilateral relations. So this is only a talk that we are seeing today between Shangfu and Mr. Rajnath Singh. So the future prospects are not clear because they announced in February 2021 for de-escalation disengagement. That project has not yet been completed even after 2 years.
Yes.
So we are looking for progress on ground. If there is no progress, no bilateral relations.
If there is no progress, no bilateral relations, it goes without saying there is no peace and tranquility along the line of actual control. You're right, sir, in saying that Indian and Chinese troops are almost eyeball to eyeball. We've mobilized additional troops in the forward areas. Both sides have done that. And not only was there Galwan in 2020, there was more recently another provocation in Tawang when the troops on either side once again came to blows. This time there were injuries, thankfully no fatalities, but the provocations from the Chinese never cease. Colonel Singh, let me bring you back into the conversation, sir. Of course, you and the other panelists all seem to believe, let's keep our expectations very, very low and realistic. This issue is not going to be resolved at the end of these talks between Mr. Rajnath Singh and his Chinese counterpart. Now, ahead of General Lee's visit, the Chinese Defense Ministry, while commenting on the 18th round of Corps Commander level meeting held on Sunday, said both sides had agreed to speed up the settlement of relevant issues linked to the standoff in eastern Ladakh, in addition to safeguarding peace in border areas. But as has been pointed out, claims and assurances have been given time and again in the last 2 to 3 years. And as recently as this Sunday, this statement came from the Chinese Defense Ministry. And yet, the conduct of the Chinese on the ground seems to be contrary to some of their utterances.
You see, right from beginning, their political leaders say something and their army does something on border. Abhi, you see Galwan also, these troops were highly sort of not in order. They brought these type of hidden weapons and they did all this thing which has resulted in so many casualties between India and China. So, though Chinese politicians will say anything, but their army is not in line with their politicians. Their army is totally rogue army, which always creates tension on borders. And these kind of stray incidents which takes place, it is the creation of the local commanders which are there on the borders. Now, even their political leaders have joined their army by claiming 11 places of Arunachal Pradesh as their own. Whereas these people, their places which they are claiming their own, they were the people who migrated from Tibet when Chinese occupied Tibet. They came for refuge and as a refugee they settled in Arunachal Pradesh, but Chinese are claiming their own. So these are all provocative measures, provocative actions which China is doing by claiming 11 places of Arunachal Pradesh, many places in Ladakh and other northeast regions. So, which I have already said, till such time boundary is demarcated properly and confidence building measures are sort of made properly, till then China-India relation will not improve that level where we can assure each other that we are peaceful with each other.
Absolutely right, sir. In fact, let's remind our viewers of the long list of thorny issues that exist in this very complex and difficult India-China relationship. We keep talking about Galwan because in 40 years, what happened in Galwan was really the worst confrontation between the two sides, violent clashes that resulted in the killing of 20 Indian soldiers. India, of course, has said that many Chinese soldiers were also killed in that incident. And then, of course, there have been a series of other provocations. We're talking about the Tawang incident that took place in December last year. China's repeated claims to Aksai Chin in Arunachal Pradesh just this month, seeking to rename 11 places in Arunachal Pradesh. The China-Pakistan economic corridor to the west of Daulat Beg Oldi. India's support to the Dalai Lama is something that irks China. So the list really does go on and on. But Ambassador Triguniat, let me bring you into the conversation, sir. Colonel Singh, of course, is right in saying that the Chinese army is a rogue army. Given how they have acted, let's say in Galwan, the uncivilized manner in which they attacked our Indian soldiers, the kind of combat that you saw, it is fair to call them a rogue army, but this is not Pakistan that we're talking about. This is not an army that is not under the control of its government. Here we are talking about Xi Jinping, the man who has emerged as the most powerful Chinese leader since Mao. He is not only firmly in the saddle, but we know that he is the one who calls the shots, who firmly controls and dictates China's foreign policy. He is the one who has this hawkish stand vis-a-vis India, Taiwan, the United States, you name it. And so at the end of the day, this is a very, very difficult and complex relationship, unfortunately, of two unequal parties, some would say. It's been pointed out that China's economy, for example, is 5 times that of India, and therefore, it's not really so easy for India to strike back the way we've done in case of Pakistan, for example, with the Balakot airstrikes, So it is a relationship of unequals, would you agree? And that sort of ties India hands?
Well, in certain ways, yes, because of the size of economy and the other advances that China has done. There are many reasons that we can't discuss right now on this. But at the same time, I would like to say that it may sound unequal. But if you see the India's firm response on the border, Galwan, eyeball to eyeball, and deploying the troops quickly, building infrastructure, India realizes today that the biggest challenge for India, whether on our borders or in any geography for that matter, is eventually going to be China. Because India is the only country that can give China a run for its yuan. So I think that China also realizes that. And that is precisely the reason. And today that we are looking at is that India's strategic advantage is what every other country is trying to partake in. And therefore, when the Americans look to you to in the Quad or the others in different kind of this, that India has arrived on the scene. In the sense, whether it is a swing state or not, but at the same time, India is different. And the way Indian economy is performing, the way it is growing, I think in 10, 15 years' time, we should be able to catch up with them. We have delayed ourselves. This is our fault that we delayed it that long. But at the same time, India is catching up. At the same time, I would like to say that you cannot wish away your neighbors. It is not possible. You have to learn to deal with them. They are a gift of geography and the pains of history. So you have to deal with them at every which way. But the only way to deal with China, with Pakistan, even with any other country, I mean, many people say something, but I would like to say you are also having a challenge with other major powers also, when you are growing and going to be big. So therefore, we need to strengthen ourselves, whether economically, militarily, or otherwise, so that we can give a firm response and deterrence of the kind that is required in China. And China's basic objective is to keep India within the South Asian or at best in the Asian periphery and not become a global power. That is what China basically looks at and wants to do it. And Chinese, we need to be very careful. We need not worry about the border with China or the border war with China. That can as well happen. But I'm more worried about their gray warfare zone, their technological cyber security. All those are new kind of weaponry that is coming into play now. That has a bigger destabilizing effect, and we need to counter with them with a solid communication strategy and a proactive response mechanisms.
All right. You're quite right, of course, Ambassador, in pointing out that, even when our soldiers were attacked in Galwan in the most brutal fashion by the Chinese troops, India gave a fitting reply to China. India gave China a bloody nose. We lost 20 of our soldiers, unfortunately, but according to many estimates, the Chinese may have lost close to 40 of their soldiers in that incident. But, looking at the larger foreign policy, scenario involving India and China, Dr. Kondapalli, let me come to you now. I think we can all agree that even though, the Chinese economy may be 5 times our size, and we have those challenges that we have to deal with, whether it's China's financial muscle or military might. But this is a country that is increasingly seen as a headache by the international community. It is known for its hegemonic designs, for its brazen expansionism, and for acting as a bully. Therefore, would it be correct to say that, the international community now, especially the West, led by the United States, is now increasingly looking to India to act as a counterfoil to China in Asia?
Well, that has been the project, but India has not accepted that project yet. The first time this was mentioned was by Condoleezza Rice, the then Secretary of State, in February 2005 in a speech in the Sophia University in Tokyo, where she mentioned about United States wanting to help India to become a global power in the 21st century. And the quid pro quo they were suggesting is to obviously address the China-related matter. India has not accepted that position yet. For example, Dr. Manmohan Singh's statement to President Hu Jintao or Prime Minister Modi's speech in Shangri-La Dialogue in June 2018, they clearly mention about the inclusivity and also about the non-containment or whatever that you would like to say. So India has not accepted this partly because of the Indian foreign policy ethos. Secondly, it has implications for the budget, defense budget. Thirdly, it is an ideological issue as well. So India is not prepared for that. But that doesn't mean India cannot make a truck with the Western countries. And as you know, the Quad meeting has been held 4 times, and the next one is for the Sydney meeting. There is substantial focus there on vaccines, critical technologies, as well as on maritime dimension, where the China question becomes much more animated. So there is an approach by the Western countries, but Indian concern is first the material capabilities need to be upgraded. So that is number one. Number two, we have our own programs for increasing our GDP and various other indicators. So we have, for example, the $10 trillion economy projection that we plan to have. And there is also the increased spending in the infrastructure projects, not just closer to China, but also with the South Asian countries and others, ASEAN countries. So there is a lot of program that has been laid out as a factor of countering the threats that we face in the continental or in the maritime domain in the Indian Ocean region. Okay. So I think there is a lot of roadmap that is being made, and I think it's a cautious policy that India has adopted.
Okay, it's interesting you say that India has not accepted this construct. But, and before I go back to Colonel Singh, I believe Ambassador Trigunayat wanted to come in. Sir, would you not agree that yes, it is true that India's army is not the size of China's, the Indian economy is not the size of China's, but given that India is viewed as not only the largest democracy in the world, but as a growing and emerging regional power and a global power as well. After all, we are the SCO chair this year, we are the G20 chair this year. Would it not be correct to say that the West is in fact increasingly looking to India, hoping it would act as a counterfoil to this bully called China?
Well, I think that India looks at, and I fully agree with Professor Kondapalli on this, that India looks at China. China may not look at India as an equal, but India looks at China as an equal in terms of being able to give a fitting reply and to be able to resolve the issues. Because irrespective of the fact that India's economy is lower and in many other indices, we might not be equal to them. But at the same time, you understand that India's soft power is far, far stronger, with a much bigger outreach, and its resilience. And the way India is moving forward, and this.
I agree, but you've not answered my question, Ambassador, about how the West views India through the prism of China. That's the larger issue I was talking about.
Yeah, that's what I'm telling you. The West views India as a pivotal state. And that's why they are looking at India. But, that's one way for them to look at India and to collaborate with India, whether in defense, security, or economic engagements. But for India, India cannot be the frontal state like Ukraine has become in this war between Russia and the US. So India does understand those things. But that does not mean that India can sit idly by and think that China will go away. It will not. China will remain a hegemonistic power. It will exert itself. It will assert itself. And I think, and I'm not just simply being bully-headed when I say that India is the only country that can frankly and realistically respond to China in a multiple ways, not necessarily on the border. Because today's age, and let me just tell you once again, which I could not say last time, is that no superpower, mark my words, has ever won a war. You have seen USA losing in Taiwan, in Vietnam. You have seen China losing in Vietnam. You have seen USA losing in Afghanistan. You have seen Soviet Union disintegrating and losing in Afghanistan. And this is what is precisely happening everywhere. So that does not mean that you are a bigger power that you can just bulldoze everywhere. USA also cannot do its bit everywhere in the world.
Yes,
And so
but you know,
cannot
you
China.
would agree that China has emerged as quite a headache, not just for India, but in fact for the international community, given its very provocative stance on multiple issues. China is seen as one of the handful of countries that have actually extended full support to Russia, you know, following the Ukraine war. And of course, we've seen their stand on Taiwan as well. And it's not for nothing that you have Quad emerging as such an important regional grouping. It is really, whether anyone likes to admit it or not, aimed at containing China's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific. But Colonel Singh, I will give you the last word, sir. You know, I talked about earlier at on the show, I talked about how last year in November at the G20 summit in Bali, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping came face to face and exchanged pleasantries for the first time since the Galwan clashes. Now you're going to have the Chinese president visit India for the SCO summit later this year and the G20 summit in September this year. Therefore, there are some who say that, you know, Beijing needs to prepare the ground for Xi's meeting with Prime Minister Modi to ensure that there are no surprises or awkward moments ahead of those summits. We can say those are multilateral summits, but these two leaders are going to come together. Therefore, do you think in the run-up to those crucial summits and Xi's visit to India, could things change any which way?
You see, if you remember, when Chinese premier came to India and Prime Minister Modi took him to Ahmedabad and made him feel very happy about it, when they were Jhula Jhulo, etc. they were doing.
Yes, everyone remembers that.
Chinese army was creating problem in Ladakh. So when I said Chinese army, rogue army, which they do not see that their president is inside the India and they are creating problem in the borders. So same way, though Chinese premier is visiting India in the later part of this country, year, but I don't believe the Chinese army will sort of try to maintain tranquility, peace, and try to maintain that kind of atmosphere by seeing the past this thing. But I can assure you in the end, that India has prepared himself so well especially on Chinese front, that China cannot succeed against India now. Even South China Sea, by forming Quad, India is giving befitting reply to China. And China is
point taken, sir.
Now.
Point taken. Point taken. So, you certainly believe that no matter what claims the Chinese make, no matter how many assurances they give us, or how many times Xi Jinping visits India, nothing is going to change as far as China's attitude towards India is concerned, as far as its conduct along the line of actual control is concerned. So, can we really expect any substantive progress in this thorny relationship ahead of the SCO and G20 summits? Anybody's guess, but most experts seem to believe we should keep our expectations low. On that note, I'd like to thank Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, Colonel Shivdan Singh and Dr. Shrikant Kandapalli for joining me on the show. Before we leave you, we're going to play out for you some excerpts of a News9 documentary on the complex India-China relationship. It's called Frenemies. Why? Take a look.
This is a dichotomy between economy and between warfare. These are separate baskets and they should not be compared.
Why do we allow them to sell us goods that we can make on our own?
Specific segments, particularly on the business side, we can certainly be far ahead of the Chinese.
We talked about cartel, though there may be 20 Chinese firms, they are all acting together. They are kind of like an equivalent of an OPEC cartel.
What comes to my mind is a Chinese proverb which says that the person who makes the first bad move loses the game. Who is that going to be? India has overtaken China to become the most populated country in the world. The two now account for over a third of the world's population. They are also two of the 5 biggest economies in the world. But they're currently in an eyeball-to-eyeball standoff along most of their 3,500-kilometer-long boundary. This conflict began 3 years ago when an intrusion by the PLA into Ladakh ended in a bloody brawl. Ironically, trade between the two nations is on an all-time high, almost $140 billion. It's quite a curious relationship, and one is compelled to wonder what Xi Jinping really wants from India.
I think he wants the Indian market, no doubt about it. We are the largest market in the world which is untapped yet. So he is certainly looking at it, particularly as he finds that the European and American markets are getting closed to him.
This is a dichotomy. And you know, these dichotomies existed for a very long time. Germany had the maximum trade with European countries in 1914. But Germany fought a long war, the Great War with the same countries. So between economy and between warfare or issues of territorial issues, these are separate baskets and they should not be compared.
It's really a matter of showing their dominance, of, in the worst case, of rubbing our nose in the mud, to just saying, hey, I'm the big guy and I'm happy to be with you and give you to grow peacefully, as long as you show your obeisance to me in some way.
This isn't the India of 1962. This time around, India seems to have stood up to China more strongly than it did in the past. China has realized that putting India in its place is going to be trickier and more challenging than it has been before. The tactics it seems to be employing, therefore, are much more varied.
Just to give you one example which is more recent, and I looked at the data, that there are 4 areas: telecom, electronics, textiles and garments, in which China has between 1/3 and half the world's entire market for exports. That's huge. I have never seen such numbers in history. I would call that a monopoly. We talked about cartel, though there may be 20 Chinese firms, they are all acting together. They are kind of like an equivalent of an OPEC cartel.
Let me take you back a few years to understand what China has been doing over the years, overtly and covertly. They have been systemically, with a lot of state sponsorship, supporting funding-wise or expansion of what they don't permit in their own countries in other countries. So that could be used for influence operations, data gathering, spying,